Elias had lived on the ranch since he was a small boy. The land was dry, the wind was harsh, and the days often felt longer than they really were. But the place carried the memory of his father. Every corner of the field, every fence post, every old tool had a story attached to it. Elias loved the land, not because it was easy, but because it was home. He had grown up watching his father work from sunrise to sunset, caring for the cattle, fixing broken gates, checking the water supply, and doing everything necessary to keep the ranch alive. Now, years later, Elias found himself doing the same, but the world around him had changed in ways he could not control. The drought had hit the town harder than anyone expected. The fields that once grew grass for the cattle now looked like pale, cracked earth. The animals were weaker, and some had already been sold just to pay a few bills. Elias kept trying to stay hopeful, telling himself that things would get better soon. But every day seemed to bring a new challenge. The expenses never stopped. The water pump broke last month. The fence on the south side needed repairing. The cattle feed became more expensive, and Elias had to choose between keeping his animals healthy or keeping a little money aside for himself. He tried not to think too much about the bills sitting on the small wooden table inside his house. Some of them were months overdue. Electricity, feed suppliers, medication for the cattle, each one reminded him that he was falling behind. Elias was a man who worked hard and rarely complained. But even he felt the pressure squeezing tighter every day. The ranch was not just land to him, it was his family's history, the place where he had learned everything he knew. Losing it would feel like losing a part of himself. A few weeks earlier, Elias had injured his ankle while trying to fix a fence that had come loose during a windstorm. He slipped on a wet rock and twisted it badly. The doctor had told him to rest, but resting was not something Elias could afford. So he wrapped the ankle himself and continued working, even though each step felt like a sharp reminder of his struggles. He moved slower than before, and the extra time it took to finish chores made everything else pile up. On that particular afternoon, Elias was driving his old truck back from a cattle check on the far side of his property. The sun was going down, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, but Elias hardly noticed. His mind was too full of worries. He kept thinking about how he had only a little money left, just enough for a few groceries, maybe some bread and a bit of rice. He had been stretching his meals, eating smaller portions to make the food last longer. There were days when he drank water and skipped dinner, telling himself he wasn't too hungry anyway. When he reached the town, Elias stopped at the small roadside market before heading home. The market was simple, just a few stalls, some wooden tables, and a couple of shops nearby. People in the town were friendly and familiar with each other. They often greeted Elias warmly, knowing he was one of the hard-working ranchers who kept the local economy going. But even friendly faces could not erase the tiredness he felt inside. As he parked his truck and stepped out, he felt the ache in his ankle, reminding him to walk slowly. He reached into his pocket and touched the few crumpled bills he had. He had already decided what he would buy: bread, milk if it was on sale, and maybe some eggs if he still had enough left. He planned everything carefully these days because every coin mattered. Just as he closed the truck door, he noticed a figure standing near the entrance of the market. It was a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. She was small, with thin arms and neat dark hair tied into a simple ponytail. But what caught Elias's attention more than anything was the doll she held tightly against her chest. The doll was old, a little worn, with faded fabric and a stitched smile that had probably comforted her many times. The girl stood quietly, looking around as if waiting for someone. Her eyes were wide, holding something between hope and uncertainty. She did not rush toward anyone, nor did she seem playful like children usually were. Instead, she looked thoughtful, maybe even worried, as if she had come with a purpose too big for her small age. Elias did not think much at first. Children sometimes waited outside the market for their parents, especially those who did not want to walk around the aisles. But something about the girl seemed different. She wasn't shifting her feet or humming or playing with her doll. She was simply waiting, standing still, watching people enter and leave the market. When Elias walked closer, He gave her a polite nod, thinking she might smile back or look away shyly. But instead, she took a small step forward. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but steady. "Excuse me, sir." Elias paused and looked at her carefully. The girl lifted the doll slightly, holding it with both hands as if presenting something important. "Can you—" She hesitated, gathering courage. "Can you buy my doll?" For a moment, Elias did not understand what she meant. He looked at the doll, then at the girl, and then back at the doll. Children rarely sold their toys, especially not ones they held so lovingly. His first thought was that maybe she was playing a game, pretending to be a shopkeeper. But the seriousness in her eyes told him otherwise. "Your doll?" Elias asked gently. "Why would you want to sell it?" The girl pressed her lips together before answering. She looked down for a moment, and when she looked back up, there was an honesty in her gaze that made Elias stop breathing for a second. "My brother," she began slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. "He hasn't eaten in 3 days." Elias felt something in his chest tighten. The girl continued, her voice trembling just slightly. "We don't have food at home. My mother is working, but she didn't get paid this week. She's trying, but—" Her eyes lowered again. "I thought, maybe if I sell my doll, I can buy some bread for him." The world around Elias suddenly felt quieter. The noise from the market faded. The sound of cars passing by barely reached his ears. He looked at the girl, at her thin frame, at the doll she was willing to give up for her younger brother. She shouldn't have had to think like this. She shouldn't have had to worry about food or selling her favorite toy. Elias knew what hunger felt like. He knew what sleepless nights felt like. He knew the fear of not having enough. But seeing that same fear in a child's eyes was something different. It struck him deeply, pulling at memories and emotions he thought he had locked away. He tried to speak, but there were too many thoughts in his mind. The girl's innocence, her bravery, her desperate attempt to help everything overwhelmed him. He was already struggling, barely managing his own life, yet he felt a pull inside him that he could not ignore. In that moment, Elias froze. Not out of shock alone, but because he suddenly felt the weight of a choice. He had so little, yet she had even less. And standing there in the fading sunlight, looking at the young girl holding her beloved doll, Elias understood that some moments ask the heart to speak louder than fear. That moment was one of them. Elias stood quietly, still trying to understand what the little girl had just asked of him. Her voice was soft, but her words kept echoing in his mind. She was holding out her doll as if it was the only thing she had left to offer. The small toy, though worn and faded, seemed special to her. The way she clutched it showed how much it meant to her, yet she was willing to let it go for her brother's sake. That alone touched Elias deeply. He slowly knelt down so he could speak to her at eye level. He didn't want to frighten her or make her feel pressured. He simply wanted to understand more. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The girl held the doll a little closer and replied, "Lila." Her voice carried a kind of innocence that reminded Elias of a time when he himself was a child, worry-free, unaware of how heavy life could sometimes become. He looked into her eyes and saw a mixture of sadness and hope, balancing together. "That's a beautiful name," he said softly. "And this doll, is it yours?" She nodded. "My grandma gave it to me when I was little." Elias saw how her fingers tightened for a moment around the doll, almost as if she was asking silently whether she really had to let it go. It was clear that offering to sell it wasn't easy for her. This wasn't a child playing at a pretend shop. This was a child who had made a difficult decision. "Why do you want to sell it, Lila?" Elias asked again, this time more carefully. She looked down at her shoes before answering. "My brother is hungry," she whispered. "He's very small. Mama says he needs to eat more, but we don't have food. She works a lot, but they didn't give her money this week." Her explanation was simple, but the meaning carried the weight of a real struggle. Elias felt something shift inside him. He had seen hardship, but hearing a child describe it so plainly hurt in a way he couldn't explain. "How old is your brother?" he asked. 5, she replied quietly. He cries at night because his stomach hurts. Mama tries to make him sleep. She tells him stories and gives him water, but he still cries. Her voice shook softly on the last words. Elias felt a deep ache in his chest. He looked at the girl's clothes, clean, but worn out and too light for the cold wind that was beginning to blow. It was clear she tried her best to stay presentable, even when life wasn't easy. Children like her often learned early how to hide their struggles, but sometimes their eyes still revealed everything. "Did your mother send you here to sell the doll?" Elias asked. Lila quickly shook her head. "No, Mama doesn't know. She would get sad. She told me to wait at home while she went to work. I came here because people have money here." She paused, unsure of her words. "I thought maybe someone would buy it, even if it's only a little." Elias's heart tightened again. This small girl had walked alone to the market, carrying the only toy she had, hoping someone would notice her need. She wasn't begging. She wasn't asking for help. She was offering something of her own, something precious just to feed her brother. It was kindness and courage that no child should have to show at her age. "Lila," he said softly, "are you sure you want to give your doll away?" She nodded slowly, though her eyes told a different story. "My brother needs food more than I need a toy." The maturity in her voice surprised Elias. It sounded like something an adult would say after years of experience, not something an 8-year-old child should ever feel. He knew then that she had seen more struggle in her short life than many did in decades. "And your mother?" he continued gently. "She works every day?" "Yes," Lila said. "She leaves early when it's still dark. She comes home late. Sometimes she is so tired, she can't stand very long. But she still smiles at us." Her words held such warmth that Elias felt his throat tighten. He thought about how his own mother used to smile for him even on days she was tired or worried. Memories brushed through his mind. Memories of a simple, loving home. "What about school?" he asked quietly. "I go sometimes," she replied, lowering her eyes. "But Mama said I can stay home until things get better. I help her with things like washing and cleaning. And I watch my brother so she can work. She's 7. She's 7. Her voice was matter-of-fact, as if she believed this was simply her responsibility. In many ways, it showed just how much she already carried. Elias took a slow breath. He looked down at his own hands, rough, weathered, a little dirty from the ranch work. He remembered the bills waiting at home, the empty shelves in his kitchen, the struggle he had been living with. He wasn't a wealthy man. He wasn't even stable at the moment. But as he looked at Lila, he realized that her situation was far more urgent than his own. Still, he wanted to understand more before making any choices. "Does your brother know you came here?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. He was sleeping. I told him I would be back soon." "And your house? Is it far from here?" "2 streets away," she said. "I can walk." Elias noticed how she spoke with quiet confidence. The kind that comes from having no choice but to be brave. She wasn't complaining. She wasn't asking for pity. She was simply doing what she felt she had to do. A passing car made her flinch slightly. Her hands tightened around the doll again. Elias realized she might be nervous talking to a stranger, but her need was stronger than her fear. That alone said everything. "Lila," Elias said softly, "do you want me to buy it now? Is that why you stopped me?" She looked up, her eyes large and hopeful. "Yes. If you can. You don't have to. But I need some money to buy bread. Even a little is okay." Her innocence broke something inside Elias. He felt a longing to help her, to take away the worry she carried so bravely. For a moment, he tried to imagine how desperate she must have felt to walk here alone, ready to give up her only toy. He reached into his pocket, where he had placed the small amount of money he planned to use for himself. It wasn't much. It was just enough for simple groceries to last him a few days. His own kitchen was nearly empty. His nights had been filled with worrying about how he would make it through the month. He knew the weight of fear too well, but looking at Lila, he felt something shift inside him. Hunger for an adult was difficult. Hunger for a child was heartbreaking. and hunger for a younger brother being carried by his little sister's love that was something he could not ignore. He did not speak yet. Instead, he studied her face again, trying to find the right words. She took a tiny step closer, still holding out the doll, as if afraid he might walk away. "I'm sorry," she murmured, thinking she had bothered him. "I just thought—" "Maybe." Elias quickly shook his head. "No, Lila. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm just thinking." She nodded, waiting quietly. The wind picked up, blowing a piece of her hair across her cheek. She brushed it away with a gentle movement. The doll still tucked carefully under her arm. Elias noticed how thin her wrist was. He wondered how many meals she had skipped to let her brother eat instead. He stood slowly, his ankle aching, but his mind no longer thinking about his own pain or struggles. Everything inside him was focused on this small girl who had come to the market with courage bigger than her size. "Lila," he said after a moment, "I will buy your doll." Her eyes lit up instantly, like someone had turned on a small spark inside her. She held the doll out with both hands, but Elias wasn't ready to take it yet. Instead, he asked, "What were you planning to buy first?" "Bread," she answered without hesitation. "And maybe milk if I had enough." Her priorities were simple, pure, and heartbreaking. Elias slowly reached for his wallet again. He knew this choice would cost him something. Maybe he would have to make his own food stretch even longer. Maybe he would skip another meal, but some decisions come from a place deeper than comfort. Some decisions come from the heart. Elias stood there quietly, looking at the small girl who was still holding her doll with such care. The market around them continued with its usual noise, people talking, shopkeepers calling out prices, cars passing along the road. But for Elias, all those sounds felt distant. His mind and heart were focused only on the girl in front of him, on the weight of her words, and the courage she had shown in asking him for help. When he spoke again, he used the calmest voice he could. "Lila," he said gently, "I need to ask you something." She looked up at him with her big, hopeful eyes. "Yes? How long has it been since you ate properly?" he asked. She paused, as if she wasn't sure how to answer. Then she shrugged a little. "I had tea yesterday morning," she whispered. "Mama gave the rest to my brother." Elias felt his heart twist. He had been through hard days, but hearing a child speak about hunger in such a calm, honest way made him realize just how deep her family's struggle was. Lila wasn't complaining, and she wasn't crying. She was simply stating the truth as she had learned to accept it. But children were never meant to accept hunger as something normal. He knelt down again, ignoring the pain in his ankle, and spoke softly. "You should not have to sell your doll for food. You know that, right?" Lila lowered her eyes. "I know, but I don't want my brother to cry anymore. He's small. Mama says small children need food, or they get weak." Her voice trembled just a little on the last word, and it broke a piece of Elias's heart. This small girl was carrying worries far too heavy for her young shoulders. A child should have been playing outside, running around, laughing, going to school, not walking alone to a market with a toy she loved, hoping someone would buy it. Elias looked at the doll. It was old but cared for. The stitches were neat, and the fabric, though faded, was still clean. Lila must have treasured it for years. He could imagine her hugging it to sleep at night, talking to it when she felt alone, or carrying it around when she felt unsafe. A doll like that wasn't just a toy, it was a piece of her childhood. A source of comfort. A memory of her grandmother. "Lila," Elias said, "why didn't you ask someone else for help?" She pressed her lips together carefully. "I tried once," she admitted. "I asked a lady last week, but she said she didn't have money. I think she was in a hurry." There was no anger in her voice. No blame. Just a quiet acceptance that sometimes people were too busy to notice a child's need. "And today," Elias asked softly, "why did you choose me?" Lila thought for a moment. "You looked kind," she said in a tiny voice, "and you stopped walking when you saw me. Others just walked fast." Elias felt his throat tightening. He didn't feel like a kind man. He was a tired man, a worried man, a struggling man. But the fact that this little girl had seen kindness in him when he felt at his lowest made him realize how much children observed with their hearts rather than their eyes. He reached into his pocket once more. His fingers brushed against the few bills he had. It wasn't a lot, but it was all he had for the next several days. He stared at the money in his hand, thinking about how he had planned to buy food for himself later. But then he thought about Lila's brother, 5 years old, crying at night because his stomach hurt. He thought about Lila's small voice and her determination to help her family. The decision felt difficult, yet at the same time, it felt completely right. He looked at her and said softly, "I will buy your doll, Lila." Her eyes widened with sudden joy, bright and warm like a small light turning on inside her. She held the doll forward with both hands, as if offering him something precious. But Elias didn't take it yet. "Before I give you money," he said gently, "I want to ask something else. Does your mother know how hard things are for you and your brother?" Lila nodded slowly. "Mama tries to hide it, but I know. She works at the bakery. She comes home tired, but she still makes us smile. She says we will be okay soon." "And what about your father?" Elias asked softly. She shook her head. "He left a long time ago." The simplicity of her answer carried a quiet sadness, but Elias did not ask more. He respected her silence. He took a deep breath and finally reached out to touch the doll, not to take it away yet, but to show her he understood how much it meant to her. The doll's little fabric face seemed to smile back, unaware of the heavy moment happening around it. "Your doll is very special," Elias said softly. "Are you sure you want to give her away?" Lila hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the doll one last time before she whispered, "My brother is more special. I wouldn't store." The truth in her words was so pure that Elias felt tears burning behind his eyes, though he tried to hide them. Children could be extraordinary. Their love, their loyalty, their innocence, they were capable of doing things adults sometimes forgot how to do. Finally, Elias took the doll and placed the bills into Lila's hand. But he didn't give her the price of a used doll. He gave her much more, enough to buy bread, milk, rice, and maybe even something extra. Lila stared at the money in her palm, confused. "Sir, this is too much." "No," Elias said firmly but kindly. "Your doll is worth this and more." "But," she tried to protest. He gently shook his head. "It's okay. It's okay. Lila. You take it. Buy food for your brother. And buy something for yourself too." 18A. She blinked fast, trying to stop the tears that gathered in her eyes. One small tear escaped, sliding down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, embarrassed, and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you so much." Her voice trembled, but her smile was real, glowing with gratitude and relief. For the first time, Elias saw a little bit of the child she truly was. A girl who wanted to laugh, to play, to live without worries. Elias stood up slowly, his ankle aching again, but he ignored the pain. Lila clutched the money tightly and took a step back, as if afraid someone might take it away. She looked at Elias's face, then at the doll now in his hands. Can I go now?" she asked softly. "Of course," Elias said, smiling. "Go get something to eat. And walk carefully." Lila nodded. "I will." She turned around and took a few steps toward the small grocery shop nearby. But after a moment, she turned back again and ran up to Elias. Without saying anything, she wrapped her small arms around his waist in a quick, gentle hug. Elias froze, surprised. The hug lasted only a second before she stepped back again, shy but smiling. And then she ran toward the store. Elias watched her disappear inside the little shop, her small figure almost blending with the others. He stood motionless, holding the doll carefully in his hands. The weight of the toy was light, but the meaning behind it felt heavy. He looked at the doll again. Its stitched smile seemed unchanged, but somehow the little toy felt different. It carried a story now, a story of courage, sacrifice, and the love of a little girl for her younger brother. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Elias realized something important. He had come to the market worried about his own struggles, But he was leaving with a reminder that even in hardship, kindness had a place. He didn't know how he would manage the rest of the week. He didn't have answers for his own problems. But helping that little girl had filled his heart with a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. And that warmth was something worth holding on to. Elias stood by his truck for a long moment after Lila disappeared inside the small grocery shop. The doll she had sold him rested gently in his hands. It was light, soft, and worn from years of being loved. He held it with care, almost with respect, knowing it had been something precious to a child who had so little. The evening wind brushed past him, carrying the coolness of night. The sky above had changed into soft shades of purple, spreading calmness across the small town. He leaned against his truck and watched through the store window as Lila moved slowly along the small shelves. She held the money he had given her with both hands, almost afraid to drop it. He saw her choose a loaf of bread, then pick up a small packet of milk. She looked at the prices again and again, counting carefully, making sure she could buy everything without spending too much. Her worry was clear even from a distance. Yet her movements showed a bit of hope she hadn't carried when she first approached him. For a moment, Elias wondered whether he should follow her inside, just to make sure she was all right. But he stopped himself. She had shown courage today, and she deserved the small victory of standing on her own, making choices for her family. He wanted her to feel proud of herself. He didn't want her to think she couldn't handle things without someone holding her hand. He stayed near his truck until she came out again. When she did, her small bag of groceries looked almost too big for her, but she held it close against her chest. She glanced around, her eyes searching briefly as if hoping to see him again. When she spotted him, she smiled shyly and gave him a small wave. Elias lifted his hand and waved back. He could have called her over, but something inside him told him that watching her walk home with a sense of pride was exactly what she needed. So he stayed where he was. She turned away, carefully holding the bag, and walked down the road, with small but confident steps. He stayed there a little longer, watching until her figure disappeared around the corner. Only then did he place the doll gently inside his truck. He sat behind the wheel without starting the engine, resting his hands on the steering wheel as thoughts filled his mind. He thought about his ranch, the bills waiting for him, the feed he needed for his cattle, and the repairs he still hadn't made. He thought about the pain in his ankle, and the fatigue that had settled deep in his bones. But strangely, despite all these worries, he felt lighter than he had felt in months. His problems hadn't disappeared, but something inside him had shifted. It was as if helping Lila had opened a small door within his heart, letting in a light he didn't realize he needed. After a few minutes, he finally turned the key and drove home. The road felt different, quieter, softer, almost peaceful. The sky continued darkening, and the first stars began appearing above the dusty horizon. When Elias reached the ranch, the familiar sound of the wooden gate creaking greeted him. He parked the truck outside his small house and carried the doll inside. The interior of his home was quiet and plain. The old clock ticked on the wall. His kitchen shelves were almost empty now, but he didn't mind. He placed the doll on the table, its stitched smile facing him. For a moment, he simply looked at it, remembering Lila's voice and the softness of her hug. He ran his fingers over the doll's fabric and whispered, "You're safe here." He didn't know why he spoke to it, but the moment felt right. He sat down, feeling his muscles relax for the first time that day. The silence around him felt peaceful, instead of lonely. He didn't feel hungry anymore, not because his stomach was full, but because his heart carried a warmth he had forgotten existed. Later that night, as he prepared to rest, he placed the doll on a small wooden shelf near his bed. He didn't intend to keep it forever. He knew someday it would have to return to its true owner. But for now, it stood as a reminder of something beautiful: the courage of a child and the power of kindness. The next morning, the sun rose early, painting the sky golden. Elias woke up feeling unusually refreshed. Even his ankle hurt less. He stepped outside and breathed in the cool morning air. The ranch was silent except for the distant sound of cattle moving slowly near the fence. The earth was still dry, but today he saw it differently, as if a quiet hope had settled across the land. After finishing small chores, he drove back to town to buy some groceries for himself. When he reached the market street, he noticed a familiar figure standing near the bakery. It was Lila. She wasn't alone this time. Her mother stood beside her. The woman looked tired but kind, with soft eyes and worn hands. Lila was talking to her, pointing towards something in a quiet, excited way. Elias parked his truck and stepped out. The moment Lila noticed him, her eyes lit up. She tugged gently on her mother's sleeve and whispered something. Her mother turned toward Elias, her expression surprised and slightly worried. Lila waved at him and took a few small steps forward. "Sir, it's you," he smiled warmly. "Hello, Lila. This is my mama," she said proudly, pulling her mother closer. Her mother gave him a humble smile and said softly, "Sir, my daughter told me everything you did yesterday. I wanted to thank you." "You don't need to," Elias replied gently. "I just helped a little." But her mother shook her head. "Sometimes a little help is all someone needs to keep going." Her voice was warm but filled with exhaustion. Elias could see how much she had struggled. Yet she stood with dignity, like someone determined to protect her children, no matter how hard life became. Lila stepped closer to Elias and whispered, "My brother ate so much last night." And he smiled again. Elias felt a soft joy blooming in his heart. "I'm glad." Her mother looked at him again, this time with gratitude deep in her eyes. "If you ever need anything at all, please come to us," she said. "We may not have much, but we have kindness to give back." Elias nodded gently. "Your kindness is enough." A small silence settled between them, calm and warm. Lila watched him closely, her smile pure and bright. "Can I visit you someday?" she asked. Elias chuckled softly. "Of course. I live on the ranch just outside town. You're welcome anytime." The idea seemed to bring her happiness. She took her mother's hand and held it tightly, her face glowing with excitement. Before leaving, Lila's mother reached into her small bag and pulled out a tiny ribbon, faded but clean. She handed it to Elias with both hands. "It belonged to Lila when she was little," she said. "I want you to have it, as a thank you." Elias hesitated, touched by the gesture. "I can't take something so personal." But Lila nodded eagerly. "Please keep it. Mama says gifts from the heart are important." He accepted the ribbon gently. It was small, but it carried meaning, gratitude, trust, and a bond formed in a moment of need. As the day went on, weeks passed, then months. The drought slowly ended. Rain returned. The grass began to grow once more. Elias's ranch recovered little by little. He repaired his fences, saved money again, and even bought a few new tools. Life still had challenges, but he faced them with a stronger heart. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, Lila and her brother would visit the ranch. They would run around, laughing, feeding the animals. Lila always asked to see the doll she once loved. Elias kept it safe, and whenever she held it again, she smiled in a way that reminded him how much strength lay inside her small heart. One day, when everything had finally settled and life felt peaceful again, Elias understood something truly important. Kindness, given in a moment of need, has a way of coming back. Not in money or gifts, but in warmth, in friendship, and in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that one simple act changed someone's life. And in that truth, he found a kind of happiness he had never known before. The happiness of realizing that even in the hardest times, compassion makes the world brighter. One small heart at a time.